Welcome back. You have found us here, Talk North Podcast Network. This is Wooden Sticks. We are recording from the Aquarius Home Services Studio, and my name is Kevin Cork. Thank you for being a part of our listenership, and looking forward to getting to the Wild season this week. As this show comes out over the weekend, the Wild will have already played their opening night game. We are recording this midweek, so on the eve of that big matchup with Dean Evison and Columbus. I got to tell you, training camp's gone really well. Super impressed with the work these guys have put in. A lot was made about how hard training camp was, and I can't speak to it from a player's perspective, but guys like Wes Walz and Ryan Carter, who I am over there with every day watching the procession, they can speak to it. They've played for different coaches. Wes, played for Jacques Lemaire, who's about as tough a coach as there is. Carter played for Randy Carlisle out in Anaheim, won a cup with him. And so, yeah, these guys have a pretty good lens when it comes to how hard camp is, and they both were taken back by the work these guys put in and how hard John Hines and his staff pushed the Wild. And so now we'll see if it plays out with some success early in the year, because Bill Guerin and all the way through the coaching staff, everybody has talked about how difficult the October schedule is and how important it is for this team to get off to a better start. Last year, they lost a lot of tight games. Their special teams struggled, and their goaltending was below average in the first month, and it cost Dean Evison his job. Dean's a great coach, and I can't wait to see him. And again, we're recording this, so I'll see him for the opener. That'll be over by the time you're listening to this. But one of the all-time just great dudes and class acts in the game, Dean Evison. So super excited to see him. But, that first month last year pretty much put them behind the eight ball for the rest of the season. And even though they had stretches where they looked like a playoff team, they kept having stretches where they got banged up again and struggled. And I think they're going to be better in a couple of aspects this year. Mentally, I think they're in a better place. I think they've got an edge to them. There's a chip on their shoulder, and I think that's important, because if I know this locker room, you think of Jared Spurgeon, you think of Marcus Foligno. These are sweethearts of guys. I want them to be playing with a chip on their shoulder. Marcus Foligno is a better hockey player when he's out on the edge, not over the edge like we saw in that playoff series a couple years ago against Dallas, where I think that he got, and his teammates got a little bit over the edge and took some dumb penalties, and it really tilted the scales back in the favor of the Stars after the Wild had secured a lead within that series. But I want guys like Spurgeon and him to have a little bit of a swagger and edge to their game, and that's what I've noticed during camp. Goaltending is going to come down to a couple things. Number one, the Flower is the Flower. He's a great influence. He's a great teammate. He's a Hall of Famer, and when he plays, you're going to get a rock-solid effort. He's going to be 40, so he's not going to play much more than 25, 30 games. So now it comes down to Wallstead and, of course, Gustafsson. Gustafsson's lighter. He's in better shape, and he's also, I think, going to play a different style. Last year, he got a little too loose in the way he played, and having talked to him, I think some of the things within his structure to his game, how he plays the position, are going to be tightened up. And I think playing with Marc-Andre Fleury mentally has been good for him. But watching Marc-Andre Fleury, and he admitted to this, that sometimes he wanted to make those big flashy saves to look better. It's not about that when you're Philip Gustafsson. You're a bigger goalie. You play more of a solid positional game. And I think he and Freddie Shabbat, the goaltending coach, are getting him back to where he was 2 years ago. And Jesper Wallstedt, the big wall, like, this guy has looked awesome. And if you look at the preseason games, it's not just the stats. He's had the best preseason of those three goalies. So he's going to push. And I think he's here right now at the start of the season, not just to be around those two veteran goalies, but to push specifically Philip Gustafsson, to remind him that if you don't play at your highest level, I'm here. And I think they'll get him in the first week and change here. I really do. And I think he's earned it. And I think it's going to be exciting to see how this plays out. They've got some depth at that position, and they've got Marc-Andre Fleury to kind of help that whole thing stay cohesive. So, yeah, it's been an awesome training camp. Looking forward to the busy weekend it is. Back-to-back games on Saturday and Sunday, and then the Wild play in St. Louis on national TV next Tuesday. I'll be in town all week because we're not doing that game, so we'll record a new episode of this show, and then we leave a week from Friday on that 12-day, 5-city journey that's going to really make or break the month of October for the Minnesota Wild. So before we get to all that great Wild conversation that the season will provide, especially when I'm traveling, having on folks that are in the traveling party, we'll reconnect with guys like Michael Russo and Wes Walz and Ryan Carter. I was thinking about high school hockey. And the reason I was thinking about high school hockey is my dear friend Lee Smith, longtime nearly 30-year coach at Eden Prairie, lives out in Utah. And he was texting me yesterday, exciting times out there in Salt Lake City where he lives for the new team and the first game in that building. And so it got me to think back to what Lee did at Eden Prairie and the players he coached over the years, some NHL stars like Nick Leddy, who also, besides winning a state championship for Eden Prairie, won a Stanley Cup in his time with the Chicago Blackhawks. He plays now over in St. Louis. So we're going to connect with Lee Smith. We're going to talk a little NHL hockey, a little Utah hockey, and of course, go back in time and focus in on his great coaching tenure at Eden Prairie. Before we get to that, though, a quick conversation about my dear friend John Schweitz. Johnny Schweitz is part of the Freemasons. They've got those secret handshakes and those awesome pancake breakfasts, but he's a big part of Masonic charities here in Minnesota, and they prefer you think of all the work they do right here in our community at places like the Masonic Cancer Center, the Children's Hospital, and the Masonic Home over in Bloomington. Those are just a few examples of the important work that Freemasons support in Minnesota. And as part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, these Masons have consistently answered that call when it comes to charitable needs. So thank you to John Schweitz for being our lead sponsor this year on Wooden Sticks. And if you know of anybody, maybe it's you, but that wants their business elevated, we've got a guy in charge of advertising that you need to connect with. We call him the White Dog. His name is Andrew Height. He used to run the show in terms of travel with the Minnesota Wild. Fantastic guy, really well connected. AHEYDT at talknorth.com. Connect with the White Dog and be a part of the show. When we come back, it's Lee Smith right here on Wooden Sticks. We're back on Wooden Sticks, recording today live from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Very excited to be joined by a legendary high school coach on the boys' side in the state of Minnesota, longtime friend of mine, led Eden Prairie to 3 different state championships. My dear friend, joining us from Utah, Mr. Lee Smith.
Great to be on with you, Gorgie.
You know, Lee, it's funny. We go all the way back to the early 90s. I had just gotten hired at Burnsville. You had just started up at Eden Prairie. You know, and Burnsville kind of had that renaissance in the 80s with Tom Osiki, and they were on the back end of that, where Eden Prairie was just kind of on the front end of what we've seen since in places like Lakeville and Maple Grove, where the community was kind of small at that point, but starting to grow. How vivid are your memories of those early years? Because, you know, I looked at your bio and I didn't realize this. I knew you coached there for 29 years. I knew you won the 3 state titles, watched you coach in all kinds of big games. I didn't realize that first year was your only losing season at Eden Prairie. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I walked into a good situation, just like you talked about, a situation where a city was growing, hockey is becoming more prevalent, along with the talented football team that Mike Grant had always put out there. But I had a belief that if we could learn to skate with you and Burnsville and the Jeffersons and the Edinas, that we would have a chance to have a really good program for quite a while with the numbers coming through.
You know, numbers don't necessarily guarantee success. And I look at Wyzetta, who's been one of the big dogs in terms of enrollment here for the better part of the last decade and a half. And they've had a state championship, but it hasn't been easy for Wyzetta. It hasn't really been easy over in Maple Grove either. They've had the numbers recently. That doesn't guarantee anything. And the other thing I looked at when I looked at your tenure at Eden Prairie is how difficult the section alignment was for your program. Like I think people forget. Well, they hear, oh, Eden Prairie, and you mentioned Mike Grant and what the football team has done. But I think people forget that for a lot of those years, you know, 3 of the top 6 or 7 teams in the state were in that section. I remember a section final in 1998, that 6 overtime classic where you guys are facing off against Edina. Those are 2 of the best 5 programs in the state, year in, year out. So, yeah, it's great to have numbers. That never guaranteed you any success.
Yeah, I feel pretty proud of the fact that after that year, we lost in 6 overtimes. The next year, we were able to go, and we lost to Greg Treble's Holy Angels. Great game there. And then we bounced back the next year. We lose to Edina in 2004 overtimes. And then from 2001 to the end of my career, we had a really good run of going to the state tournament. I was proud of that.
It's funny you bring that up. 13 different state tournament appearances, which just blew my mind because I experienced that as a player back in the 80s. I have never experienced that as a coach. And the one thing I remember, and I miss coaching, but the one thing I'll never forget is how, as a coach, especially the head coach, you kind of live vicariously through the ups and downs of the emotions of your team, your kids. And I always look back, and the state championship in 85 was great. And I was super lucky to be the goalie on that team. But to me, the most excitement we ever felt wasn't after that state tournament championship game. It was after the section final. Because for every kid that ever played high school hockey in Minnesota, all they ever talk about is getting to the state tournament. You experienced that 13 different times. What was it like that first time to experience those emotions for those kids, knowing that it had never happened before?
Well, the thing about it is we always would preach that. I mean, realistically, that was the most important game of the year. Kevin, you're exactly right. Once you got to the state tournament, you could treat your kids like rock stars and be part of something that you dreamed of. And me coming from Wilmer was us, it was like realistically, we were never going to go to the state tournament. So when I was able to coach it and preach like how special it was and get the kids to buy into that fact, it was really spectacular to always try to get to that St. Paul and to get to be with them that one last weekend when everybody else was home and you were there and spotlighting your program. And in when we got there, I think it was a little bit of disbelief just that it finally occurred because I had lost three section finals at that stage. And you know it's one thing to get to the section final, but then to lose them, it's disheartening. And to finally pull through and get there was pretty special. I was lucky enough to get to 19 of those in my career
Oh,
section finals.
oh. It's incredible because I look at the section final and people always ask me, they're like, as a player, as a coach, and now as a fan, what draws you to section final hockey? And I always say the same thing. Like, there is no other game in your high school career where that many poker chips on the table. What I mean by that is section final, two teams hit the ice. Both teams, from the time they could form a thought about hockey, dreamt about that moment and being able to win in that moment and go to the state tournament. What's incredibly pressure filled about that particular night in general is half of the people that come to that rink, half the players that arrive are going to see their childhood dream come all the way through. The other half are not only going to see that dream end, but for some of them, see their hockey career end. And for me as a coach, having been to one section final and got my ass kicked by Tom Satterdahl at Mariucci Arena, I will never forget walking in that locker room trying to pick up the pieces with those seniors, knowing that as hard as we tried, we're never going to get them to the promised land. And I think people forget about that when they walk in to watch a section final. But to me, that's the secret sauce. That's the magic that's in the building on a night like that. And for you, Lee, to have that many experiences in a section final, I mean, that's just got to be something that you think back and just smile about how many great big games you played in.
Yeah, I was again fortunate to have a lot of talent, but I think they really bought into the fact that if you lost that game, that a part of you would remember that forever. And we kind of tried to paint the picture of you will never forget that last game that you ever play with your high school jersey on. And we played that up pretty big. And then to make matters worse, at times it's you play in a regular size rink all year and then you go to Mariucci
Right.
and then you would have to play the section final in a rink that you've haven't had to play on and through the course of the year unless you played out at Lakeville, but otherwise you really hadn't played on an Olympic rink. And so the game is different. I got really good at that week of getting ready for Mariucci. We would move the nets and we would do weird things to try to tell our goalies that here's the angles that the shots would be coming down on. So we would move our net and we'd work on cycling, and we'd have half the zone to work on because our net would be closer to the wall. So it would seem like we had more room and we'd have to defend better. So we actually learned how to, change things up in practice to make them feel like they were at Mariucci, even though they weren't.
It's all between the ears, as I think any, whether it's a former or current athlete would attest to. So much of those big moments is, that belief that, hey, we've practiced this, we know the angles, and that all plays into the belief factor. So you mentioned Wilmer, and I think here on Wooden Sticks we'd like to take it back to where it began. How did you come to the game of hockey? Because when I hear Wilmer, and I don't mean any disrespect by this, Lee, because again, I don't think Wilmer's ever had the numbers to have like this big time program, but I don't think hockey when I think of Wilmer. How did you get to the game of hockey and get so impassioned by it?
Well, I think it all started with youth coach I had by the name of Steve Sharstrom, and we used to call him the Shark. The Shark kind of took a group of peewees and loved it, and we didn't have an indoor rink. We had Garfield Civic, which was an outdoor rink, and we used to play there with the Bantams, and the high school kids would all get on and play shinny with a tennis ball. And then I fell in love with it. And then having teammates like Brian Nelson, Barry Nelson, Erdman, uh, Oss, just a lot of really good people around. And, we kind of fell in love with it. And then we went down to Doug Woog used to have a summer camp, and it
Hmm.
was really wasn't a camp, it was just a league. And we went down there and we did pretty well. We were like, oh, we can skate with these guys. We can hang, and so we had a pretty good high school run. We never got to the state tournament. We lost to Danny Tuzno and Dallas Miller our best year there
Oh,
at the Met Center, and then I went on to play at Mankato, and at Mankato I didn't really necessarily love it there, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my teammates. The hockey part was fine, but I loved coaching, and going into teaching. I thought, what a better way to teach and to do something I love with coaching. And I was just lucky that I landed out there. So pretty special.
how did it come together that the job opened up at Eden Prairie? Was it did the teaching job open up first, or the coaching job? And what did you know about Eden Prairie hockey? Because I don't think people understand that going back 3 decades, it isn't like it is now. Like Eden Prairie was completely different when you got hired. They were not looked at as a state power in anything.
Right. I graduated from Mankato, and I went down and I did my student teaching at Bloomington Jefferson with Stan Shea and Satterdahlin. And the
Oh,
job, my old head coach took the Eden Prairie job, and he was there about 4 years and did a good job. But, you know, parents were kind of up in arms with things with him. And um, so the job came open. I was 27, and I pretty much had to tell the AD that um, either I would have a chance for that job, which I knew I wouldn't be guaranteed with uh, no experience, or I would have to go somewhere else. I was true story. I was offered the teaching job, and my principal said, "Well, you can have this teaching job, but you can't coach." And I said, "Well, all right. I know that coaching pays, and teaching paid about 28 at that time, so it was a no brainer." And then the next day he called and he said, "I liked your answer. I I was just making sure that you wanted to be a teacher first, and so you can coach too." So he allowed me to do it, and that
oh,
began the run.
unbelievable. I literally, that is just it, you were meant to be there. And I think, I look back and I know we met in the early 90s. So we banged heads for a few years before I moved on to the college job at St. Thomas, but I've always been plugged into high school hockey. I've done so many of the section and state tournament games. What I remember the mostly about you as a coach is how you were all in terms of your passion, in terms of your work, but on game nights, you were able to have fun. And what I mean by that is, I sometimes got too wrapped up into the emotion of the moment, and I literally was tied up in knots. Whereas I look at you, and I remember vividly multiple games at Mariucci where I would be sitting in the stands watching you and pulling for you because you were my friend, but seeing you on the bench, and you had this look on your face where I knew you were having fun. And being able to have fun in those high pressure moments, I think is a gift. And you had that gift. I don't know how you did it because I was nervous just watching.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that in life, you surround yourself with good people. And I always had good assistants and guys that I could trust and guys that would go the extra mile like I would for the kids and want them to be successful and live or die. Like, a part of me still aches for the team in 98 that didn't go to the state tournament. That
Hmm.
was probably the team of all the teams that I wish would have gone there, because they're the guys that really changed Eden Prairie hockey. They were warriors. They didn't know the word no, and they found it out the hard way. And I think after that, we always were to watch the one stride that we didn't take on a back check that Edina chipped over our goalie on a great rebound and won in 6 overtimes and had our hearts ripped out. And then from then on, we were able to show them the what it takes to get there. And but I think, part of me trying to stay calm and love my players was to have fun and try to let them understand that you got to enjoy that moment. You don't get many times in life to have, well, that kind of pressure, but yet that kind of experience, and to go out and fight your best and accept whatever happened as long as you gave it your best run.
Yeah, I think it's ironically that we're talking about that 1998 section final, the six overtime loss to Edina, because if I had to pick a staple from your success in your 29 years at Eden Prairie, it'd be big games, big overtimes, and winning far more than you lost. And I think a testament to that is two of your three state titles were won in either overtime or multiple overtime, and a bunch of those section titles we talked about, 13 state tournament experiences involved either overtime or multiple overtime games. So, was there something that you and your coaching staff evolved and maybe learned how to extract from your players when, because I think of those multiple overtime games and how much success you guys had time and time again, how you guys were able to keep your legs going. Is that something you built throughout the season? Is that something the depth of the roster played a factor in? How did you guys seem to get better as the game went longer?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think the thing that I learned in my first 7 8 years of coaching is that you can't win with two lines. You needed to play your depth. And so during the regular season, I grew as a coach in trusting other players and telling them that if they were able to just get pucks out, I didn't care if they scored a goal all year long. If they were able to get pucks out and help us not be trapped in our zone, that they would play in the clutch moments. I promised them that. And so through the course of the year, we would change our lineups to find the guys that could get pucks out and we could trust and would not take dumb penalties. And so we got pretty disciplined and we got good defensively. Never great. I was kind of grew up with the era of the Edmonton Oilers and try to outscore people, but when you got to the state tournament, it was always a race to three. And so um and then we'd always talk about sudden life instead of sudden death. It was always sudden life on our bench. Next shot could be sudden life. Who's going to be the hero? Who's going to who's going to take that shot? Who's going to get that greasy goal tonight? Because they're usually not pretty. In fact, Kyle Rowe's goal against Duluth East is probably one of the
Oh,
greatest all-time goals
yes.
in the history of high school hockey as far as the state tournament, just in the pressure of that game and to make that play and be even thinking to dive to make that play. He was a warrior.
Yep. That goal is iconic. It's one of the greatest goals in the history of high school hockey in Minnesota. I think that's a nice transition when you mentioned Kyle Rowley played in the NHL, played some games with the Minnesota Wild, and you've got four guys. Even though you're a few years removed from coaching, you've got four guys. I saw your post on Facebook yesterday, getting ready for the official kind of unofficial opening day of NHL hockey. Jason Blake with Carolina, Nick Seeler in Philly, Casey Middleton over in Colorado now, and Nick Leddy up in St. Louis. When you look back at coaching those four guys and what they meant for your program, how soon did you realize, Lee, that you were dealing with not only a great high school player, a player that could go on to play Division One, which you had plenty of those over the years, but maybe somebody that might be extraordinary? Because I look at those four guys specifically, and these guys are thriving at the highest level now.
Right. Well, Nick, what made Nick so special was he could have gone and played USHL or at Ann Arbor at that time when that was just starting out, and he chose to be there. And some of his buddies got cut that he anticipated being on the team, and we brought in the youngsters, and that first championship in 2009 along with Nick, we had 10 sophomores on that team.
Wow.
And so he was just an extraordinary leader. And it wasn't a lot that Nick said. He was a pretty, pretty quiet guy, but he led by example. And he would knock on the door after a game and he might have a goal and 3 assists. And he would say, Coach, is there anything that I can do better? And, you just shake your head after what he just did on the rink and say, no, we'll see you Monday. Thanks for all your hard work tonight. And he's just one of those kids. And Casey was always above everybody at his stage, and he could have left, and he didn't. And Nick Seeler grew. He was like 5'10" as a sophomore and a stud. And as a senior, he was probably 6'3" and just a man. And just watching him transform, uh, you know, and then Jackson is just a unique player, just a special talent, and what he did for us, he won the state tournament, then he goes to Chicago, wins the title for the USHL in overtime, and then he goes and he's a Hobie Baker finalist, at North Dakota. He just a unbelievable talent. And that's not to label all the kids that are still fighting underneath it, that are still trying to get their way there, that still have a good chance.
Oh, there's many more in the pipeline. And I want to go back to Nick Leddy because he was a part of that first state championship team, and he's also won a Stanley Cup. And I don't know this, so I'm asking this, kind of wondering what the scenario was. But I'm so fascinated with the Stanley Cup and what those guys do with their one day with the cup. Was Nick able to bring that cup back to Eden Prairie?
He sure did.
Oh,
He brought it back, and I got pictures on my phone of my young sons at that stage looking up to him, taking pictures with it, and him going off after that. But he spent like 3 hours at the Eden Prairie Community Center taking pictures for all the people in that community, and that was the start of a lot of special things out there.
yeah, and it's funny because over my 19 years now covering the NHL, I've had a chance to interview Nick numerous times and connect with him, and just such a, as you mentioned, kind of a quiet guy, stoic guy, but such a class act. And then I think of Nick Seeler. I got to tell you, one of my very favorite players I ever covered with the Minnesota Wild. That guy, Nick Seeler's an animal, man. I don't know what you guys were able to extract from him, but the one thing I know about him is that guy stands up for his teammates like nobody I've ever seen. It doesn't matter who's out there running his teammates. He'll drop the mitts. He'll protect teams. He'll block shots. Like he's one of those guys that whatever it takes, he's going to get the job done, and that's super impressive.
No question about it. Nick, I coached a guy by the name of Stu Bickle, and Nick Sealer, and those two are by far the toughest guys I've ever coached while at Eden Prairie. Stu Bickle would take a hit and he'd come back and he'd be shaking his head. Stu, you gonna calm down? Yeah. You gonna calm down? Yeah. Next shift, he'd go out there and run somebody, take a penalty, and just and Nick was the same way. Nick didn't play as much in the 2009 state tournament. He got a couple shifts late, and he went and stapled a kid at 5'9", 175. Took a penalty against to get in the to get on the score sheet. But then in 2011, he was the captain, a whole different player, ran the power play, just an absolute stud. And
Yeah.
Nick, you always knew was gonna be continue to get better and better because his work ethic was just both of the Knicks, their work ethic was to die for, just watching those guys every day at practice getting better.
So I know you have, you still like me will keep tabs on high school hockey. It's in our blood. It's in our DNA. Growing up here in Minnesota, no matter where we're living, no matter what we're doing, we're tracking it. So how do you, from the outside looking in now, evaluate where we are at in Minnesota with high school hockey? I know you mentioned a couple of your players had the chance to leave early, and I've always thought like if you're good enough, you're going to get wherever you need to go. But I know the mentality is changing, and I know with college hockey specifically with the portal and how things have drastically changed. There's less and less of I want to be there and play with my buddies, and more of I got to get here, I got to get there, I got to hurry, get to the next level. And I'm worried for high school hockey, and I just wonder what your observations are from the outside now looking back in.
Right. First of all, I thanks to Wags' website, watch just about I watch games like every Tuesday, Thursday, just to keep
It doesn't
tabs
surprise
on
me.
it. It's fun. I still enjoy it. I miss it immensely, although I'm very busy with what I'm doing. But I miss that. But um, I'm a little concerned. And why I'm concerned is everybody's got a skill coach now. Everybody's got a parent advisor. All these people, and you know what I had? I had Paul Ranheim that would tell these kids, hey, I was able to stay in Edina. I was able to go to Wisconsin, and I was able to do it the right way. I took every step on the ladder and I didn't skip steps. And I believe that a lot of our kids really bought into that fact. And I think given Nick Letty stayed and he won the championship, I know that was a major reason that a lot of other kids stayed.
For
Casey, and
sure.
he felt that he owed it to his class. Kyle Rao, he had the opportunity to leave and go play at Sioux Falls his senior year. And in fact, he didn't come back to tryouts till the second day he was out there. And I think it just hit him that his senior year he could have that chance to do something with his buddies one more time. And then how ironic he gets the triple overtime goal, and you know and without him we never would have got there. With him we win it. And so I think it's hard. I think a lot of people are in these kids years. It's dangerous. I think there's a lot of really good hockey coaches in Minnesota. The program's set up right. um, but they get all these other people in their ears and it's dangerous.
I believe it. Yeah, I think that if the kids are just allowed to go out there and just play the game they love, it'll all take care of itself. But I think we've gotten to the point now. And I think, again, social media plays a role. Everybody's living on Facebook or living on Twitter/X, where it always paints the picture that the grass is always greener. And I think kids are super susceptible to, oh my gosh, if I go here, I'm going to automatically get this opportunity or that opportunity. And I've always told kids, and I get the chance throughout the year to speak at different banquets, talk to different high school kids and teams. And I'm like, listen, I can tell you this. You can travel the world around, but I have had conversations with players at the highest level, guys like Neil Broughton that have won Stanley Cups and been a part of the Miracle on Ice and won a gold medal representing their country and won a national championship, nothing can replace the time you have when you're a high school kid playing with the buddies that you grew up with representing your hometown. You can't get that anywhere else, Lee. And I think that once you put it that way, then I think kids start to realize like this is pretty cool. And there's always going to be junior hockey. There's always going to be college hockey. There's always going to be pro hockey. And if you're good enough, you're going to get there. But I think kids sometimes, and I think parents too, get kind of, a little bit distracted by the big carrot and not really realize that the journey is more than half the fun.
Right. Well, I think you're 100% right. An interesting story. 2 weeks ago, the Utah Hockey Club started practicing right after us here in Utah. And my bag was out in the lobby.
Yeah.
And I come out, and Nick Bukestad's looking at it like, I wonder what this is here for, because it's a Minnesota state tournament bag. And I come out, and he
Oh,
goes, I heard you were out here. I didn't know you were actually at the rink right before us. And the guy is so humble and sat and talked to me. And he goes, I really like you, but I didn't. You ended my high school career in the
yes.
semifinals. And so, but he remembered his last high school game, like we talked about earlier, how important that is. He remembered the Blaine team losing to us.
Mm.
But what a great human being to sit out there in the lobby and talk to him.
Yeah, he's just a classic, and we've had many conversations, and he's brought that game up. But he knows you and I are buddies, so that game has come up numerous times in our conversations, and just you won't find a nicer kid than Nick Bukestad. So let's talk Utah. You're out there now. We got to watch the very first game for the Utah Hockey Club last night. Super cool to see the atmosphere. How do you think this is going to play out once the shiny new toy is now just a regular old NHL hockey team? How is this community going to support hockey, knowing that basketball team, the Jazz, have been there forever and they have a great, obviously, base of fans and a great tradition that goes along with it?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that when my wife got moved out here for her career and I came out here with her, I thought I was being sentenced to no hockey. And then I went and watched the state camp of all the top Utah kids. And then I saw that this player was in Vegas and this one was in Boston and this one was in Colorado. And I'm like, well, if we're able to keep all these kids here, we could have a pretty good team. And so I got hired, and I had to coach 3 teams last year. I coached the 18s, the 16s, and the 14s. And this year we've had a lot of success. Things are going really well. I was able to bring in some kids from New Mexico, Montana, Idaho, Colorado, and the Utah kids. And so, anyways, we've been lucky enough to win the Seattle tournament, the Vegas tournament, and we just won our tournament. So we're
Wow.
having some success out here, and the kids are really buying in. And there's some really good hockey players here that I planned on sending film to some of the MIAC schools and stuff like that that are going to be able to play at a higher level. But I think the interest is pure here. There's a lot of love for hockey because hiking, biking, whatever, people do it out here. People are very fitness focused. And I think that people are going to look at the NHL and see how hard these guys work. They're going to appreciate that. Um, there's the money out here to be able to buy the season tickets and things like that. So I think they're going to do well. And I think they oversold their season tickets, so people are getting like half this. The seating isn't perfect yet for a year. They're going to work on the arena in a year from now. There's some obstructed seats right now, and you'll see that when you come here. But I think it's going to be all in all that Ryan Smith puts a lot of money in anything he does, and I think that these guys really feel appreciated after what they went through in Phoenix. And so I think it's going to work here. I got a good feel.
Yeah, it sure looked like it last night, and I think that team's going to be sneaky good. This Arizona team, the last couple of years was young, but you could see the potential. And I watched that game last night, and this is a hockey team that I think is going to be in the playoff conversation all the way through. They're going to be a real factor in the West, and I think that's going to only stoke that fire more. But clearly, there are hockey fans in Utah. I can't wait to get out there. It's one of the few markets I haven't been to. I've never been to Salt Lake City, and I'm super excited now that you're out there and we can connect when the Wild are out there. That's going to be cool. And I loved watching that game last night. That I don't know how much you caught of that game, but that was really cool.
No, my wife and I, we were in a suburb and we decided to move downtown so we could get closer to see our guys when they come in, see you.
Hmm.
So we are 2 blocks away. I walked down and was part of the pregame stuff with Shabuzi and all the stuff that they had going on there. Very cool scene. A lot of my players were there last night. So it was a really good atmosphere, and it's gonna be fun to have you come here and experience Salt Lake. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, looking forward to that. It's really going to be another fun aspect to the Wild travel season to have you out there and be able to connect with you. That's going to be fantastic. Well, Lee, we got one small segment left here. It's the hat trick hot seat. I'm going to fire off 3 quick questions at you. There's no wrong answer. I just love to kind of give our listeners a kind of a peek behind the curtain to get to know you a little bit better. So, are you ready for the hot seat?
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I know. So you can't pick Eden Prairie because it's got to be a venue where you visited on the road. But if you could pick one arena, one venue where when you walked in, it was like, my God, this is so cool. What an iconic hockey venue in Minnesota. What would that spot be?
Braemar.
Yeah, I knew you were going there, and you've had some great games there. My very first game as a varsity coach back in 1993 was at Braemar, and I'll never forget it. We won 4-3, and winning in Braemar is not easy, as you know, and that
Right.
is such a cool place to watch high school hockey. It's like a time warp, and love your answer. All right. This is a good one because we're about the same age. You're a little younger than I am, but we're about the same age. I want to know your first concert. I want to know the venue and the band that you went to see the very first time you got to go to a concert.
It was Greg Kinn band. He was with Rick Springfield and somebody else and the Pretenders at the Met Center.
You were going to chase girls,
And
not
we
listen to
didn't
music.
yeah, and we didn't we were waiting for Rick Springfield to sing his favorite song. We didn't know coming from Wilmer that there were warm up bands, and so Greg Kinn was playing his set, and we were like, "Are we at the wrong spot?" So I do remember that because it was Brian and I. We went to the Met Center or Met Stadium. It was outdoor show,
Oh wow.
and yeah,
Oh yeah. Greg Kinn was that the Jeopardy song. Our Love's in Jeopardy. Great tune,
yes,
by the way. A very underrated song, and I believe he passed away in the last few months here. So I've been hearing that a little bit more on my Sirius XFM when I drive
I,
to the rink.
I,
So good pick.
hey, Gorgie, I wouldn't. I'm going to tell you this, and people, this is my wife had me go to Young Gravy on
Oh,
Saturday,
jeez.
past Saturday. So
Okay.
if you ask me my last concert, it's embarrassing, but I went to Young Gravy with her.
I never in a million years would have guessed Young Gravy as your most recent concert. But you know what? Sometimes you got to take one for the team. Sometimes you got to try something new. My daughters love Young Gravy. I haven't got there yet, but I'm not going to close the door on it now that you've been to a show. So, final question is you can go out with your wife for one special dinner, and it can be any place in the world. Like there are no rules. You can almost time travel if you have to, but one restaurant, one spot. Where are you going, and what are you having for dinner?
I'm going. There's a restaurant in Cabo San Lucas
Mm.
that is on the beach that we like a lot. I can't think of the name of it, but our favorite place to get away is Cabo because it's like San Diego, but we like Mexico a lot. So I
Oh,
would say we would be going to Cabo together.
What would you be having in that special meal, though? Would it be authentic food from that part of the country or the world, or would it be something unique?
I think we'd probably go a little surf and turf. I think we'd do
There
a
you
little
go.
sea bass and a fillet and call it a
Oh,
day.
great way to close the conversation. The old sea bass trick. Lee, so cool connecting with you on the show here. Can't wait to see you in Utah in a couple months when the Wild come out there. And I just love talking high school hockey and really appreciate you doing this today.
Well, you mean so much to me, so thanks for everything.
You're the best, Lee. That's Lee Smith, longtime Eden Prairie coach and a dear friend. And his passion comes through even in a podcast with me, and that makes me feel a little extra special today. We'll be right back after a quick break to put a close on Wooden Sticks. Great to hear that emotion from my dear friend Lee, and I understand it. He poured his heart and soul into that job at Eden Prairie, and I don't know how it ended. I just know that it wasn't really the right way to end it, and I think Eden Prairie was better for having Lee Smith there. And it's not just the 3 state championships and the 13 trips to the state tournament. I coached against Lee, and you get to know these coaching staffs when you have a team that competes against another team year in, year out, same conference, and then you watch as a broadcaster later in life how they succeed at certain levels and how they perform in section tournaments and in-state tournaments. And Lee always did it for the right reasons. The love of the game and the care for the kids. And he took care of everybody in that room, from the star player to the fourth line winger that played 6-8 minutes a night. Lee was the guy that took care of everybody in that room. And so, yeah, I think he misses it. I think it's not always easy for Lee to talk about it. And I appreciate the fact that he's willing to have these conversations. And, I think you could feel it, especially in the close of the show, how much he really cared for and now misses Minnesota high school hockey. And I think he's doing wonderful work where he is out in Utah. And I can't wait to see him in December when the Wild are out there. And that's kind of what this show is all about, man. We're taking it old school. We'll take it back. We got to hear a little bit of his background and Wilmer going on to play for the Mavericks at Mankato. And I mean, just one of my really dear friends in the game of hockey. And so it was an honor to have him on today here on Wooden Sticks, and I appreciate all you sticking with us through that walk back in time for high school hockey over at Eden Prairie. What a run it was for Lee Smith. 13 state tournaments, 3 state championships, and just a wonderful human being. So that was cool. We're going to get back to Wild hockey next week. I promise. Sort of tied to either the North Stars or the Wild as we kind of embark on the start of the season. Look forward to seeing you guys all in TV land as we have a busy couple weeks ahead. I mentioned the games this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. One home game against Seattle Saturday, a road game up in Winnipeg on Sunday, and then that nationally televised game against St. Louis Tuesday before we embark on that super long 12-day road trip, which is really going to be an impactful one, not only on October for the Wild, but on the entire season. And I'm going to say it right now. Will hold me to it. This prediction right here. The Wild will be a playoff team in the West. They will get to 100 points plus, and I say they win a round in the playoffs. I'm sticking to it. I think they're going to be a much healthier team this year, and I know from watching training camp that this team is a better hockey team than the team we saw last year. So I'm on record right here with that prediction. Thanks again for listening to Wooden Sticks. We'll catch you next week during the first week of the travel season.